faculty at Northwest University. It is my privilege once again to welcome you to our webinar series themed COVID-19 and Insights from the Humanities, Social Sciences and IKS, Perspectives from the Global South. The webinar today, titled Research Cooperation, Intellectual Property and Dissemination, will be addressed by critical thinkers and intellectuals in this subject. I know they will challenge us even more this week to think critically about the benefit of intercontinental research collaborations, especially during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. Speakers will also share about intellectual property matters, especially what and why some types of intellectual property get valued more than others. We thank all the speakers in advance for the insights that you will provide on the subject, just later by the facilitator. This webinar follows last week's webinar that was addressed by Dr. Ang Shabli Healing in Africa in the future. It was fascinating, engaging from the questions and comments that followed his input. We're looking forward once again to the conversations today. They give meaning to what we seek to achieve from the research collaboration between the two universities in Namibia and South Africa. From this research collaboration between Northwest University and Namibia University of Technology, we wish to engage in research that unearths knowledge that has been marginalized in the academy, primarily because of its place of origin. Africa as a site of knowledge production needs to be resurrected in a manner that we have started with. Secondly, the subject of this webinar series seeks to center humanities and social sciences in influencing national policy and mitigation plans against the coronavirus. I'm delighted that we have started the way we have in giving a human face to the virus. Please join us. Paul, if you can please flight the next series on screen, the webinar series screen, the next topics. Please join us in the next 4 weeks as we engage in teasing out the main theme of the webinar series. As you can see, 20th of August, we have one language matters. 27th of August, therapeutics. 3rd September, gender dynamics, that will be addressed by, I think two of our scholars actually from Namibia University of Technology and Northwest University. 10th September, community engagement. And then we end off with a celebratory event on the 23rd of September. Please join us and invite others to join in the coming weeks. Let me now take the opportunity to first acknowledge my colleagues in the Humanities faculty at Northwest University, as well as from the IKS Center in the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences at Northwest University. It is also a great privilege to have collaborated in this series with my counterpart, my colleague, Professor Alina Zahuje, the Dean of Human Sciences, and her team from Namibia University of Science and Technology. Lastly, I wish to introduce the facilitator of this session, Dr. Mokgadi Molope. Dr. Molope is a senior lecturer and deputy director at the School of Social Sciences at Northwest University in the Faculty of Humanities. Before serving as a deputy director, she was a subject chair for development studies at the same university from 2008 to 2011. Mokgadi is a teacher by profession, having taught at Tlhabane College of Education from 1995 before she joined Northwest University. She obtained a PhD at Northwest University in 2017 and has lectured in development studies both at undergraduate level and supervised at postgraduate level as well. She's published in the area, has reviewed journals, and continues to engage in research and community engaged research at Northwest University and in the Mahikeng area. Please welcome Prof. Dr. Mokhadi as she introduces our next speaker in this series. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Maseko. Good evening, everyone. Tobela Kialidumedisha, my name is Mokhadi Molope. I'm going to present to you our very first speaker, Mcholoko Dr. Zulumathabo Zulu, who is a doctoral practitioner, metaphysical scientist, inventor, author of books, and software engineer with experience in North America. He completed doctoral dissertation with Basotho School of Mopato in 2017. He completed honors in mathematics and computing sciences in 1997 and postgraduate in object-oriented analysis and design in 1998 in Canada. His latest scholarly paper is African Drama, Telegraphy, and Indigenous Innovation for the University of Pretoria. Zulumathabo is a research scientist and director for Madisebo University College Institute in Sandton. He is a member of American Mathematical Society Association of Computing Machinery and ANFASA. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Mcholoko. Zulumathabo, the stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. It's highly appreciated. And thank you very much, Program Director. Thanks to all the distinguished guests. I'm greatly appreciated to have this opportunity to speak about my topic here, which is historiography and philosophy of indigenous innovation. And it's a very exciting thing because these are things that we work on in our institute. So because I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll just get right to the points. And maybe the first thing I need to do is I need to define these concepts so that at least people get a context in terms of what am I speaking from, you know. So of course, there's always a debate about whether Africans have made any contribution to the scientific body of knowledge. And, you know, a very influential European philosopher, George Hegel, you know, he makes the point in his book, Philosophy of History, that Africans have not contributed anything to world civilization, to world history, intellectual history, science, you know, so he discounts us. So this is a challenge for us Africans who are scholars, who are researchers, who foreground African origin of knowledge. And the challenge comes, of course, as I pointed out here, that it's a historiographical challenge. So meaning we have to show through the sources that we actually did make a contribution. And also is a challenge on the philosophical front. So the question then is, okay, what is this historiography? So usually historiography, of course, is about, you know, the sources. It's about how, you know, knowledge or history is written. And in Western society, they usually focus more on literary sources. Now, but I'm going to give more of a holistic definition from the African research field, that when we talk about historiography, we are talking about, of course, the sources. We draw from the literary culture because, you know, as opposed to the colonial narrative, that Africans do not have writing systems or writing scripts. Actually, Africans have lots of writing scripts. So we draw, they have a literary culture. So we draw from that literary culture, and we also draw from the oral culture as well. You know, because Africans are storytellers. So you cannot, you know, put together the evidence with if you don't include that. And we also, of course, look at the artifacts as well, very important things that they produce. And another very important part of historiography is linguistic record, linguistic evidence. Because if people have a knowledge about something, or if people have invented something, there has to be a linguistic trace of that, you know? So that's basically the part about historiography. And then in terms of philosophy, I just wanna give these points that, you know, Western philosophy, because I spent most of my life in a Western society. So Western philosophy is really about three things. You know, it's about existence, you know, metaphysics, which is about reality, existence. Now, I noticed that in South Africa, scholars here don't really use the word metaphysics that much. They use the word ontology. Now, ontology is actually a subcase of metaphysics. So, but of course, in scientific terms, the word ontology is used specifically to mean, you know, a list of things that exist, you know, so that they can discount things that don't exist. For example, when you take science, let's say Science 101, you know, in our grade school years, you know, whether it is biology, physics, or chemistry, they always ask this question that, you know, what is matter? And the answer will say, you know, matter, you know, is a material that occupies space and has mass. So you can rephrase that question and say, what is reality? You know, instead of material, and then instead of metaphor, that is to say, and then the answer will still say, you know, reality is the material that occupies space and has mass. So in other words, in Western philosophy, what exists is material, and by material they mean something that has a molecular structure. You see, so and that's a Western concept. So that's philosophy. So that's the first part, the metaphysics, and the second one is knowledge. Excuse me. And then, of course, they use the word epistemology to refer to that. And the third part is the concept of value and ethics. So they use the word axiology, you know, to refer to value, aesthetics, you know, ethics, that sort of stuff. And of course, different schools of thought might categorize these things differently, but that's basically the principles that of Western philosophy. Now, I'm coming from a background of Basotho philosophy. So what's interesting about Basotho philosophy, they have 5 taxa of philosophy. Now, Western philosophy is 3 taxa. The Basotho have got 5 taxa about philosophy. And basically, their philosophy is about, they use a concept called pair, which is about, you know, existence, survivability, you know, things that have to do with reality. And then they have other concepts as well, like, you know, which is about knowing. But what's interesting is that in Basotho concept, knowing is actually sensing. You see, they talk more about sensory knowledge. Whereas in Western society, you can talk about speculative knowledge, you see. Whereas Basotho, they talk more about metaphysical knowledge. So for them, it's very important that knowledge must be connected to reality and context, stuff like that. And they have another concept of Ra, which is about design and arrangement. You will see as I talk about the parts of my presentation there, that the concept of design and arrangement becomes very important. And they have another concept of Pa, which is about transcendence. I've actually written a book. One of my books is called The Sacred Knowledge of the Desert, African Philosophical Transcendence, where I talk a lot about the concept of transcendence, philosophical transcendence. So that was Pa, which is vertical transcendence. And then they have another, the 5th one is Tse, and Tse is about crossing, is about a lateral transcendence. Okay, now, Africans have made a lot of contributions in various disciplines, like medicine. Oh, sorry, I'm in the office here, so, okay. Very sorry about that. So Africans have made lots of contributions in medicine, for example, in mathematics, and so forth. So I'll start talking about medicine. Africans, South Africa is a very interesting country because we actually have one of the richest biodiversity in terms of medicine plants. And actually, we control about 10% of the world's medicine plants. I'm sorry, I'm in the meeting. So I'm very sorry about that. So basically, what happens is that we have a lot of medicine plants here. And more than 90% of the knowledge of these medicine plants is with the indigenous doctors who have this knowledge of how these medicine plants work and so forth. So it is interesting that because we have this very rich, diverse, and very, very powerful medicine plants, albeit this knowledge has been marginalized by the colonial administration, you know, even I think even today, for example, when we hear the talk about COVID-19, you don't really get a lot of perspective from people like us who are trained in this knowledge and who work in this space. You usually get the Western medical perspective about that. But it's very important to say that we have played a lot of role historically in terms of medicine. I'll make an example. For example, in around the 1800s, England did not have a cure for tuberculosis. It's quite, you know, it's quite interesting. And what actually happened is that one of the persons who was having tuberculosis in England was actually sent to South Africa, because they had heard that the people here, they've got ways of treating this particular disease. And this particular person, this British person, actually came here. His name is Charles Henry Stevens, and that was in the 1800s. And when he came here, he actually got treatment from indigenous doctors, not Western doctors, indigenous doctors. And he actually was cured of tuberculosis. And there's a lot of documentation on this, and there's a number of, you know, scholarly papers that are written on this particular person, you know. And he actually went back to England after he was cured of this tuberculosis. So it's quite interesting that, you know, that is an example of the fact that Africans here in South Africa already had a very advanced medicinal knowledge. The institution, the school that I trained with in the Free State, they have manuscripts. We have medical manuscripts that were written by the African natives over a period of more than half a century. And when I completed the training there, I was made a custodian of these manuscripts. So we have manuscripts that have incredible knowledge about therapeutics, about etiology, about chemistry, Basotho ethnomedicinal chemistry. So we've got amazing treasure of knowledge. And it's one of the best kept secrets, of course, because we're still working to get these manuscripts transcribed, you know, digitized and so forth. So, and so I was just making a point on that. And there's various other contributions we've made. For example, when you do a Google, you're looking for something like tetracycline, an antibiotic, it will take you to Pfizer, you know, the giant pharmaceutical company. And it was given a patent in 1952 as the inventor of tetracycline. But actually, it's not like that. That patent was wrongly issued, because tetracycline was invented by the Africans more than 1,000 years before Pfizer came into the scene, before they were given a patent. And according to the rules of intellectual property, because I have a number of intellectual property certificates issued to me by the federal government of Canada. According to the rules, they have a principle called prior art, you see, or priority. What that means is that if you are trying to get a patent for some intellectual property, that intellectual property must not have prior art, you see. And then if it doesn't have prior art, then you get issued the intellectual property certificate. In this particular case, Pfizer was issued a patent for tetracycline, the antibiotic, for something that had a prior art, you see. And maybe one of the problems is that we Africans don't really write about our intellectual achievements. So maybe we need to start doing that, okay. And there are many other things. And in fact, the American Academy of Science, they published a very interesting scientific paper a few years ago. in which they actually make a point that the African tetracycline predates the modern medical tetracycline by more than 1,000 years. It's actually more than 1,400 years to be exact. You see, so that's just one of the examples of the contributions to medicine. Even other medicines that we are used to, like for example, aspirin. Aspirin is actually made from an African medicinal tree. How about that? You know, they get the knowledge from the Africans that they use this particular tree for analgesics, you know, for inflammation and so forth. And then the next thing you know, this particular knowledge of this plant is now, you know, patented by some, you know, European chemist, and there's no trace of an African there, you see. And even, you know, tablets like Grandpa, which is a derivative of aspirin, you see. So those are the works of the. So those things are very much impacted, influenced by African intellectual achievements, but without giving the Africans the credit. Okay, I want to move to the next part of my topic, which is mathematics. We have made contribution in as far as mathematics is concerned. There's a very interesting case that around the 1400s, that's now in the 15th century, there was a German merchant who actually asked a German university professor, saying that, you know, he would like to take his son to go to university, and he would like to know what's the best school for his son to get, you know, this education. Sorry, there's something that's coming out here. I don't know what's happening here. Maybe the host can help us. Okay, I think it's gone now.
Chologo, may I, if we can give you the last 3 minutes just to wrap up in.
Okay, thank you. So this particular German merchant, he then, you know, the professor told this person, said, no, you know what? We only teach here. We can teach your child addition and subtraction, but we don't teach division and multiplication. If you want to learn that, we have to send your child to Italy. And the question is, why Italy? Well, something interesting. In this book here, which is The Sacred Knowledge of the Desert, I trace the history of the calculator. So Fibonacci wrote a book called Liber. And this particular book, he writes about his experiences because he came and studied mathematics in Africa, in Algeria. And after that, then he wrote this particular book and he went and introduced this mathematics. And this mathematics now was teaching all the operations, you see? And then as a result, the mathematics changed. And in fact, he makes a point, if I can just make a quote here from here. He says, almost everything which I have introduced, I have displayed with exact proof, in order that those further seeking this knowledge with its preeminent method might be instructed, and further in order that the Latin people might not be discovered to be without it, as they have been up to now. So he's saying the Europeans have been without this mathematical knowledge that he learned in Africa, you see. And that's just one of the examples of how we have done it. So I'll just conclude by saying that in Africa, we have sophisticated mathematics. I'll give you an example. Let's say I want to multiply 9 by 9. All that I have to do, I can use 4 stones to solve that problem. You see? You put 1 stone on the ground, you call it column 1, and then you create column 2 and put 2 stones there. Now you have 3 stones, and they look like a triangle. In African science, a triangle is a calculator. It has got intelligence. Whereas in a Western society, a triangle is just a geometric shape, a static geometric shape. And if you put the 4th stone on the 3rd column, now you have 4 stones on the ground. And then when you look at the shape, it looks like a pyramidal triangle, which is how they used to build pyramids. And then to get the answer to 9 times 9, you go to the first stone, which you treat it as 10, and you count the number of stones on the 2nd column, which is 2 stones. And if you subtract that, you get 8. You put 8 on the ground. and then you count the number of stones on the last column, and there's only one stone there. And if you put it there, it's 81, and that's the answer to 9 times 9. And it's quite interesting that they use the concept of arrangement and design, which is what I was talking about as part of the Basotho philosophy. So I know I don't have a lot of time now, so I still have others up, but I suppose I can address them when people ask questions and stuff like that. I would like to say thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Choloko. A very insightful, enlightening, and mind-provoking presentation. I want to appreciate you having shared those ideas with us. Thank you very much, Ralebo. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to listen to our second speaker, Ms. Seno Namwandi. Seno Namwandi is a dynamic young scientist who is interested in convergence between science, business, and law. She obtained a bachelor's degree in molecular biology and biotechnology from Stellenbosch University in 2010. She holds a postgraduate certificate in intellectual property management and innovation from UNISA and a master's degree in intellectual property. She works in the research department of the International University of Management in Windhoek, Namibia. Namwandi was involved in the first ever open innovation project, which exposed her to the intellectual property and scenarios of technology transfer. She sits on the board of the Business Intellectual Property, and she enjoys reading, learning, music, and in her free time is an avid fitness and wellness enthusiast. Ladies and gentlemen, I now present to you Ms. Seno Namwandi, who is going to talk to us about navigating intellectual property in research and development in developing a COVID vaccine. Ms. Seno, please take the stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome. Good afternoon to my panelists and also to the audience, wherever you might find yourself. Thank you for joining us on this very important panel discussing research and development, and also the elements of intellectual property involved therein. So I want to start off by saying that Dr. Zulu has already sparked a lot of controversial statements that are typical in intellectual property. Intellectual property is especially regarded as controversial in research and development of vaccines, particularly looking at the public health system and the public sector. The reason that intellectual property is very controversial or seemingly controversial in the area of public health is because we have to balance the interests between the scientists, the pharmaceuticals, and us as the public. The reason we have to balance interest is because the research and development of any drug is incredibly resource intensive. You find that pharmaceuticals and scientists spend a lot of money in the process of drug development. Now, in order for them to recoup their investment in drug development, they secure intellectual property, which I will define in a moment, and that is then seen as a stream of revenue for them to recoup their investment in the drug development process. However, the interest of us as the public is being able to still access the medication at an affordable price. And this is where the drama is going to come from with the COVID vaccine. We have to balance the need between the scientists, the pharmaceuticals, and us as the public. Now, I'm going to loosely define intellectual property as per the World Intellectual Property Organization definition, which is a legal right that is granted to an individual or a body corporate to monopolize creation. This creation can be a result of creative activity or intellectual activity. The right is granted by a government. Now, specifically looking at drug development, we are going to be focusing on patents. And patents are a type of intellectual property. Patents are defined as a monopolistic right that is granted to an individual or a body corporate to make, sell, or import the technology that they have developed. In simple terms, this gives an individual or a body corporate the right to exclude third-party use, third-party manufacture, and third-party importation. Now, this becomes very complicated in the area of drug development because, in essence, what we are saying is once pharmaceuticals or scientists who are involved in drug development are granted a patent, it restricts the access of the drug to the public. It will restrict it legislatively by law, and it will also restrict it because the prices will then be hiked up to recoup the investment in the patent. Obviously, this gets very complicated. Thankfully, thanks to the legislation that the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, has enacted, and all the member states agree to this, that certain materials are excluded from patentability. A patent is granted on 3 criteria. Dr. Zulu already alluded to this. You are granted a patent on the novelty, meaning that there should not be any prior art. And I will explain with Dr. Zulu's example why Pfizer got the patent for tetracycline. Secondly, non-obviousness. Thirdly, industrial applicability. Those are the 3 criteria that you need to satisfy in order for a government to grant you a patent. Now, certain elements are excluded, and we have decided legislatively that if something is diagnostic or therapeutic in the treatment of human beings, that certain elements of that is excluded from patentability. So we could see a scenario where drug development in any form, be it a vaccine or normal medication via tablets, will be excluded from patents. However, we as scientists, I am a scientist as well, find loopholes to this. And how this happens is we find that some scientists and some pharmaceutical companies use certain equipment to develop the drugs, and they then patent the equipment, or they patent the process in which the drug will then be created. So the drug could escape patentability by law, but the process in making the drug will not escape patentability. Now, this will pose several challenges in the dissemination of the eventual treatment of COVID. It's interesting as an intellectual property professional for me to be hammering on the IP system. But the IP system was inherently created as an incentive framework to reward and to allow recoup of investment in the intellectual and creative process. So the World Intellectual Property Organization does recognize that the IP system and the IP regime will cause some sort of barriers in the eventual distribution of a COVID treatment. In this, I want to look and focus on the positives of having the patent system and the IP system in drug development. By virtue of a patent grant, you have to submit the information that you are requesting a patent from. So in layman terms, practically this means that scientists and pharmaceutical companies will have to submit their composition, the drug composition lists that they have in the development of the eventual COVID treatment. This will mean that it will go under scrutiny and examination, and we are then rest assured that there will be a level of quality assurance to ensure that there is no harm done to the public. I think that is an incredible positive. Second to that, the World Intellectual Property recognizes its role in the research and development of an eventual COVID treatment by opening patent scope, their patent database. Now, I don't know how familiar the audience is with patents, but patents are incredibly information-rich documents that date from years ago. So now we have the database that has been codified electronically, and the World Intellectual Property Organization has opened that database to enable researchers, engineers, scientists, and pharmaceutical companies to retrieve information that will help in the development of detection, prevention, and treatment methods to address the novel coronavirus. I think that is also an incredible positive that the World Intellectual Property Organization has opened up that will perpetuate research. And borrowing again from Dr. Zulu's example of tetracycline, the reason they could have gotten a patent is not necessarily because it is novel in its existence, but novel in its usage. So we find that nowadays there's nothing new under the sun. All the chemicals that we utilize in drug discovery are known, but their combinations are not known. So if indeed Pfizer did combine tetracycline in a novel way that Africans had not done, they would have been granted that patent legally. So that is something to consider, is that we will be looking at the different combinations and compositions of known elements and known chemicals in finding treatment for the COVID-19 virus. So those are the positives of the patent system. Unfortunately, I've already alluded to the negatives of the patent system within drug discovery. This has to do with the prices that we will now will have to experience in trying to access the medication that will help us prevent and treat COVID-19. Unfortunately, as I said, patents are very expensive. When pharmaceutical companies secure patents, it costs them a lot of money, and in the capitalistic system, they're looking to recoup their investment in this. And so this investment is felt through the prices that they charge of the medication. This has been an ongoing conversation between the World Intellectual Property Organization, the World Trade Organization, and the World Health Organization. Between the three of them, in 2001, they reached the Doha Agreement. And there are many provisions in the Doha Agreement that I unfortunately do not have the time to discuss in detail, but I want to highlight specifically how the Doha Agreement will be instrumental in ensuring accessibility of the eventual COVID-19 vaccine. The Doha Agreement mitigates patent prices by enabling compulsory licensing and parallel importation. Now, those two things will ensure that we have accessibility to the medication. Compulsory licensing is a situation where a government is allowed to override the patent holder's rights by enabling other people to make, use, or import a drug. So practically speaking, if Pfizer, for example, were to get a patent in a method that will treat COVID-19, it will be up to the country that Pfizer operates in to grant a compulsory license to other pharmaceuticals to be able to make generic drugs of this treatment. This will be incredibly important in ensuring accessibility of the drugs. Parallel importation is another means that the Doha Agreement allows to mitigate patent prices by allowing a government to import less expensive drugs into the market, even though there's a pharmaceutical within that market that makes the same drug. So these are the two means in which, if managed correctly, we could see that IP will not actually cause a barrier in the dissemination of a patent, in the dissemination of a vaccine, an eventual vaccine. So I want to end off my discussion.
Wrap up.
Yes, ma'am, I'm ending off, thank you. My considerations would be for developing countries that we need to look at enforcing the Article 31 that allows for compulsory licensing and parallel importation to ensure that eventually the treatment will be accessible to all of us, irrespective of a patent. And then it is going to be very important for countries, least developing countries and developing countries, especially with those that have little to no manufacturing capacity, to ensure that they are being given medication at competitive prices that they can afford while enforcing the Doha Agreement. So these are the ways that we can see mitigation of the eventual issues that will come up with patents. And also the conversation is ongoing to see whether they should actually be a recoup of investment, considering the fact that this pandemic is global and nobody can actually and should actually benefit from the discovery of a treatment. I don't have the answers, so we're waiting to see how this will play out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sino. That has been very insightful. We want to appreciate your presentation and acknowledge your presence in this webinar. You have really shared with us great ideas. So thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to have our last speaker for the evening, who is Ms. Magdalena Ngiki, who holds a bachelor's degree in industrial psychology from the University of Namibia, advanced diploma in intellectual property and innovation from UNISA, as well as a master's degree in intellectual property from Africa University. She believes in demystifying, promoting, and integrating intellectual property knowledge in Namibia to boost socio-economic development. What attracted her to the world of IP is the combination of intellectual property and human capital as a potent economic force in today's knowledge-based economy. She works on IP-related matters on a part-time basis. She is currently a team member of the Inclusive and Collaborative Local Tech Innovation Hub, a project by the Faculty of Computing and Informatics at the Namibia University of Science and Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, Magdalena is going to talk to us about indigenous knowledge and intellectual property. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage. Thank you very much, ma'am. Please take the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Magdalena Ngiki, and first and foremost, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts and views on indigenous knowledge and intellectual property. Throughout my presentation, I will be using the words interchangeably, indigenous and traditional knowledge, as in most research it's been used interchangeably, either indigenous or traditional knowledge. To start off with a definition, indigenous knowledge is known as knowledge or know-how, skills, innovation, or practices that are passed between generations in a traditional context and that form part of the traditional lifestyle of indigenous and local communities who act as their custodian or guardian. It can be, for example, in agricultural, environmental, or medical knowledge, or knowledge associated with genetic resources. Currently, there is no international definition for indigenous knowledge. However, there are international provisions that make reference to IK. I will not be able to mention all of them, but to mention a few is the Convention on Biodiversity and the Nagoya Protocol, which refers to the traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources and their fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from their utilization. There is also international declarations such as the United Nations Declarations on Rights of Indigenous People and the regional protocol, which is the Swakopmund Protocol, which Namibia has ratified, and it refers to the protection and promotion of indigenous knowledge. The World Intellectual Property Organization also has an international government committee which focuses on developing an international legal instrument that will give indigenous knowledge effective protection. One of the challenges that is most currently with indigenous knowledge is that, like Dr. Zuli has alluded, it's not recorded since it's passed down orally, and it can be easily misappropriated, and it's difficult in most cases to prove the link between indigenous knowledge and a community because it has not been documented. That's why it's very important to document, recognize, protect, and preserve and promote our indigenous knowledge. The role of indigenous database have played a very important it has played a very important in protecting mechanism as well for positive protection and defensive protection. Ms. Namwandi has defined what IP is. So IP protection is protecting human intellectual creativity and innovation against unauthorized users. So there are usually two protection, positive and defensive protection. Positive protection, which Indigenous knowledge community can use, is by granting an exercise of rights that empower the communities to promote their traditional knowledge, control its users, and benefit from its commercial exploitation. This can be achieved through the existing IP systems, and a number of countries has also developed specific legislation. However, in any specific protection accorded under national law, it may not hold for other countries, and that's the reason why many are advocating for an international legal instrument or a sui generis, which is a specific protection for IK. Defensive protection aims to stop people outside the community from acquiring IP rights over TK. For example, India is a good example that has compiled a searchable database of traditional medicines that can be used as evidence of prior art by patent examiners when assessing patent applications. This followed after a well-known case which the US Patent and Trademark Office granted a patent which was later revoked for the use of turmeric to treat wounds, a property well known to traditional communities in India and documented in their ancient texts. The current international system for protecting IP was usually fashioned during the industrialization and in line with the perceived needs of technological advancement society. However, in recent years, indigenous people and local communities, mainly in developing countries, have really demanded equivalent protection for their TK. IK are still like a gray area in the IP system. On the current IP system, requires disclosure so that they can be availed protection. However, community who owns IK wants their protection to be indefinite because the IP system only protects your intellectual property for a certain period. So the IK, the individual knowledge community, will like their protection to be indefinite. What the researchers are saying, or the protocols, especially the Swakopmund protocol, is saying that when the researchers or organizations are doing research in the community, prior informed consent is needed from the concerned community before access to biological resources or knowledge is granted. And prospective users should also provide complete and accurate information about the intent use of knowledge so that the community can make an informed decision on that information. As Ms. Namwandi has talked about COVID-19's drugs, natural remedies leads to indigenous knowledge. Indigenous knowledge provides hints to unique specification necessary for pharmaceutical development. That's why in activities by any member state to the World Health Organization that are related to the usage of natural remedies aimed at combating the effects of COVID-19 pandemic are expected to have met the available health requirement standards that are expected to be in compliance with the World Health Organization standards. Research is very good to be done in indigenous knowledge because it codifies and creates a system that can be turned into commercial profits. However, for decades now, Western scientific knowledge has overshadowed our IK system. To conclude, Namibia is currently having a draft IP policy that has gone through all the necessary policy formulation and is now before the Cabinet Committee on Legislation awaiting scrutiny and hopefully being approved. Then NCRST, being the national institution responsible for coordination, promotion, and funding of research activity, does indeed support research and activities pertaining to IKS. There is currently a call for funding in the area of IKS, and I think is due somewhere in August. So my recommendation is to encourage all the researchers and every one of us, the IP practitioners as well, to give value, to be able to give value to Indigenous knowledge and to really appreciate our own knowledge in everything that we do. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Magdalena, for your presentation. We want to acknowledge it and say we have indeed learned from it. Dear panel members, there are questions and comments that have been put across by participants on the chat boxes. So I have categorized them. The very first two questions are posed to all the presenters. And the first one reads as follows: Do we protect states with weak institutions from the abuse by the West? Then the second one is there a plan in place to control the harvesting of indigenous medicinal plants? So I'm going to give each one of you a minute and a half to respond. Thereafter, I will then present the questions that were posed to Dr. Zulu. Thank you very much. Any one of you can respond to the questions?
Unmute, yes. Okay, thank you very much. So the first question was, how do we protect states with weak institutions? You know, this is a very tough one, because it seems to me that a lot of, I mean, I was looking at one case where a certain company from Netherlands, they're going around the world and they harvest cannabis. So one of the countries they came to here in Africa was Congo. And they came to this particular place that has very rich cannabis plants. And then there is a chief there who controls that area. And basically they came and gave him money. And then, I think it was something like, I don't remember, 50,000 francs. And then, but anyways, they gave him dollars. It was something like $50, I think. And then he asked them, what is $50 in francs? And they said to him, it's 50,000 francs. And he said, no, that's not enough. They should make it more. And then they doubled that. And then it became 100,000 francs. And then from there, he said, you're welcome here in Congo. May God bless you, and you can have access to the cannabis. So that is the problem that I think is we experiencing around the continent. I think, outside the political interventions, because myself, I'm not political, so I don't really, play much in that space. But I think maybe what we need on the ground, we need cultural consciousness, because I think cultural consciousness can be a very important tool, not only in terms of our awareness, but it's also in terms of consciousness, to make sure that the people who lead us, like in this case, this example I just made of this particular Congo chief, that, if he doesn't follow the cultural protocols. So we need to develop these cultural protocols, and they need to be enforced by us on the ground with respect to our leaders. I think that will help towards the problem of weak institutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Zulu. I think, in my opinion, I don't always agree that we have weak institutions. Having operated in intellectual property now for the better part of 6 years, I do notice that a lot of our African countries have incredible legislation in the area of intellectual property, specifically looking at public health. So our problem is not weak institutions. I would say that we have a problem with enforcing the legislation that we have. So that is something that we have to be very clear on, because a lot of the times I find that, we have a wrong perception that our institutions are not strong enough. they are, because they're the ones who actually drafted some of the legislation, and some very good legislation on the continent in terms of intellectual property, specifically speaking to the accessibility of medication. So it's going to have to be an effort of actually enforcing it. Second to that, I think that we're going to have to be very cognizant of what our rights are as member states. A lot of African countries are members to the WTO, the WIPO, and the WHO. And these are provisions within the TRIPS agreement under Article 31 that enforce and allow for compulsory licensing and parallel importation. So if we do not know what these documents contain, we are going to be blindsided in the negotiations of purchasing the eventual treatment of COVID-19. Now, I also want to speak, even though this does not really address the question, I want to speak a lot about the actual use of the information that we have at our disposal. Right now, we have countries on the African continent that do have significant manufacturing capacity that are able to generate drugs and from research that they have. And those companies and those countries, the companies that operate in those countries, the pharmaceuticals, are also going to have to participate in this conversation. And I would like to encourage scientists and engineers to really make use of patent scope. The opportunity that we have right now in COVID-19 with having this patent database available for free is not to be taken lightly. This is information that normally outside of a pandemic is incredibly costly to contain. And those types of information really, really perpetuate research and have the ability to perpetuate innovation and also development in other areas. So our challenge is not that we don't have the capacity. Our challenge sometimes is just knowing what to use and what not to use. And in this point in time, we really have a lot at our disposal to make sure that we are not slighted in the eventual discussions of the purchasing of a drug. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your responses, Dr. Zulmatabo. May we please give you the opportunity to respond to the following questions. How can communities be protected from predatory practices by firms? What is your comment regarding the use of lengana as a cure or treatment for COVID-19? Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think on the question of how can communities be protected from predatory firms and companies, that's a very important question because I know that, in our research workshops, when we meet with students and advise them about research and all that, we always put a lot of emphasis on the aspect of following the culture, the culture that exists there, and also ensuring that there is some kind of benefit of the research, and not just go there, do research, take the information, extract. So, and then from there, it benefits you, but it doesn't benefit them. So we really promote the idea of a non-extractive, engagement with the community. And I think that maybe to protect the community against these predatory firms is basically for the community to develop the protocols, so that when these companies come to whether they're doing research or whatever, they can actually be in some kind of a formal, adherence to these protocols. That's very important, because I think the issue has been that anyone comes and does the research or whatever, and there are actually no protocols that are documented that they can be followed. I also know that what used to be a Department of Science and Technology, they have a database, which I think they call it, NIGMAS, National Indigenous Knowledge Management System, which is supposed to basically make the point that the plants, the medicine plants of a particular community, let's say, for example, in Northwest Province. So their knowledge is documented on this government database. And then any researcher or pharmaceutical company or any company that comes there, they have to, connect with this database. And that database, I think, automatically has got documents like agreements and stuff like that to be signed. There are some beneficiation documents there. I don't know actually how is it going right now, but it's a very good project in terms of providing that kind of protection. And I think it's important that anybody who comes to do research there, they can't just go directly to the community, like in a village, for example. So they need to go to the institution of that particular place. Let's say we go to Hosi, for example, you see, and then they get a permission. And a lot of our students, university students, that's what they do. They go and get these letters from the Hosi, and then from there, having those letters, then when they meet with people in the village, they produce that letter, they identify themselves, they produce that letter. So I think if we can have those kind of systems in place, it will help to mitigate against these predatory companies. Thank you. And then the second question, of course, is the use of Lingana with respect to COVID. Of course, we know that the country that has taken the lead in this case is the country of Madagascar, and they have done efficacy studies on this. They've done active compounds, bioactive compounds study on Lingana. They've also done toxicology studies on Lingana. So there is very good scientific evidence out there that Lingana has got efficacy. And we also know that there are these other two universities in Germany. I think one of them is Max Planck University, Max Planck Institute, Research Institute, and the other one is the University of Berlin. So these two universities, they also did a study, I think about maybe, I don't know, a month or 2 months ago. And then they've also shown that Lingana is very active against the virus of COVID, for example. So maybe I can just explain a little bit about Lingana. Lingana is mostly an alkaloid-based plant. So that means that, in its chemical structure, there is nitrogen there. And I think that's a very important fact to make, in the sense that a lot of plants that make poisons to defend themselves, they use this type of chemical structure. So meaning that when you're using Lingana, let's say to boost your immune system, for example, the ancient Africans used to use it as a tea. It's very critical that you don't overconsume that, Maybe you can just have 1 cup of tea of Lingana per day, not overuse it, because it can actually be toxic for you, Lingana, because of this alkaloid based on it. So I think that's a very important point to be aware of. And then to conclude on this one, we are working to establish an institute, a research institute, and then basically so that we can reach a point where we can standardize this indigenous medicine. So that, for example, if somebody comes, they've done some kind of a Lingana mix or whatever, they can bring to our lab, and then we can actually ensure that this mix here, has got the efficacy, does not have the toxins, and it will do what it's supposed to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The second batch of questions goes to Ms. Seno. And the very first question posed to you is, have you ever had an engagement with an African woman who is a health practitioner who has been exploited by the pharmaceutical companies, and what were the experiences of such an African woman? Then the second question is, what is the role of governments, especially in the developing countries, in mitigating excessive drug prices? And then do you think that we can use oral recordings as evidence in the IP fraternity? Ms. Seno?
Thank you very much for those questions. I have not personally encountered an African woman who has been exploited by a pharmaceutical company, but I would like to call your attention to a case that was very well known, experienced by the San people in the Northern Cape in South Africa. So Hudia is a drug that is used as an appetite suppressant by the San people when they go on extensive periods of hunting to suppress their hunger. Scientists in Pretoria had started interacting with the San community and eventually developed a weight loss drug that was used in anti-obesity treatments in South Africa and globally. A patent was granted by the South African government and also by the US government on this drug in terms of its efficacy in appetite suppressant, in its ability to be an appetite suppressant. Unfortunately, they were obviously exploited. None of the proceeds that came from the Hudia distribution went to the San community. And I would like to call him a good Samaritan lawyer who is conversant in intellectual property, decided to represent the San community against the SIR in Pretoria, and eventually they reached a settlement where part of the proceeds were then given to the San community to distribute, and they did so. So I just want to highlight the fact that in as much as intellectual property at times can be seen by African people as something that is exploitative, we can use it against the practices as well. And that will, as I said previously, means that we need to enforce the legislation that we have in our countries. We need to protect our people. We need to get onto the table on an equal footing, knowing what our legislations are and knowing what our rights are. The second question regarding how we can mitigate drug prices, unfortunately, developing countries and countries that have little to no manufacturing capacity do not have much of a say in terms of drug prices. And that is why the Doha Agreement is important in ensuring compulsory licensing and parallel importation. We cannot, for example, I am from Namibia. Namibia does not have a manufacturing sector specifically that focuses on drug development. So it is impossible for us to sit at a table with Pfizer, with Roche, to now start dictating prices of medication. Where we get protected is being a member of the WTO, the WHO, and the WIPO, and we can then rely on the countries that will be manufacturing these drugs to issue compulsory licenses in the event that there is a national emergency. Unfortunately, time did not permit me to say that Article 31 of the TRIPS agreement specifies very clear situations where compulsory licensing and parallel importation will be instituted, and that tends to be in times of a pandemic. And we now are in a time of a pandemic. And so countries with manufacturing capacity we have to rely on those countries, unfortunately, to use their right to compulsory licensing and parallel importation, which will then drive the costs down of the medication that will come forth in treating COVID. I know that the presentation really focused on the eventual discovery of a vaccine, but I also want to caution us as the public that there will also be detection methods that are going to be discovered by innovators, engineers, and scientists that will also go through the patent process. And so unfortunately, in those instances, we may see an area where us as the developing countries will be affected very badly because we will not be able to institute compulsory licensing and parallel importation because that is reserved for medication. So we really are in a bit of a pickle, but I trust in the legal system and I trust in the enforcement of Article 31 and the TRIPS agreement that we will be able to have a situation where the vaccines or other types of drugs that will be developed to treat COVID will be affordable for the continent and other developing countries across the globe. I think there was a third question.
Okay, oh yeah, the third question, just a second. Oh, can we use oral recordings as evidence in the IP management?
Yes and no. In fact, I would have preferred that my colleague, Ms. Nikki, addresses that question, but she's shaking her head no, so I will address it for her. But intellectual property, as I said, has various streams. Patents are one type of intellectual property. So the basic intellectual property system necessitates that information is codified in a written manner. And that is how we protect people, is it goes down to, if you have an idea, you cannot show up at your national patent office and say that you have an idea and you'd like to be protected. It actually has to be codified in a written manner, in a written document, and has to go through a registration process. Time will not permit me to go through the entire registration process of all the different types of intellectual property. But in terms of a patent, unfortunately, audio and video recordings are not used in patent applications. We use a patent draft that is necessitated by a patent lawyer who has to go through rigorous hours of codifying it in terms of claims and specifications, and that process is then also gone under examination. And once you've gone through examination, then only the patent is granted, provided that you've gone through all three criteria. So unfortunately, in terms of patents, I don't see how audios and videos will be useful. However, in terms of copyright, which is a different type of intellectual property, that is feasible for protection.
Yeah, perhaps a follow-up to that very question. Colleagues, what do you think is it that we need to do to change the mindset of the leaders in recognizing the wealth potential of IKS? Because we must acknowledge that indigenous communities are the poorest and marginalized. However, they do have this particular knowledge. So what is it that we can do to encourage our leaders to recognize it? Thanks. Magdalena, perhaps you may want to come in now.
Okay. Okay, can I come in?
Yes, Mshologo.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes. That's a very important question. I'd like to make an example about a country like China. They got their independence in 1949. They were colonized by Japan. And then 10 years later, they decided to come with a second form of revolution, and they call it cultural revolution. And then they got into this ideological split with Soviet Union, which was sponsoring the Chinese Communist Party, saying that how can you talk about cultural revolution when you should be talking about economic revolution as a logical progression from your 1949 political revolution. And Mao Zedong and others said that if Chinese are inspired by their culture, their language, their history, their thinkers, their elders, their writing system, China will be the greatest country, the greatest nation in the world, and today is the case. So I'm just making this example to say that I think we need some kind of a cultural revolution. We need some kind of a cultural consciousness raising, because our leaders who don't appreciate this thing, that's because they have not internalized the values of African culture. They're still trapped in the colonial construct where African culture is treated as backward, as pre-literate, pre-industrial. So they haven't really, so we need some kind of a very big movement on cultural revolution that will make everybody begin to appreciate the value of culture. And just to make a point that I think the value of culture is that culture controls the mind. That's very critical. In fact, culture has got more access to the mind than disciplines that specialize in the mind, like psychology, for example. You look at a hip hop artist, he appears in front of a crowd and say ho ho, everybody says ho ho, and nobody's asking why should we say that. Raise your hands and everybody does that. But if a psychologist stood in front of that crowd and starts to say ho ho, they're going to stone him, and let him get out of the stage. That's just because a hip hop artist is a cultural artist. He's a cultural scholar. He's got access to the mind via the culture. So I think our leaders And another point is that to conscientize people about the culture, I think it will have to start at a very young age, unfortunately, because sometimes, when somebody is older, then they are set in their ways, maybe wasting a lot of time trying to change their minds. But maybe we start teaching these young ones about the value of culture. That will be another investment that we need to make as a people, so that eventually we produce the leaders who see value in culture. Just like, Chinese, Indian people, they see value in culture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And then there's another question that I would like to pose to the rest of the team. It reads as follows: can we integrate IKS in the WHO country chapter in South Africa, as well as on IKS research in our faculties to enforce protection and promotion? Then the second one is, what then is the role of traditional practitioners counseling innovation? And then the last one for now, the issue of cannabis research under IKS must be Africa focused. And if that's the case, what is the ethical conduct of IKS researchers working with foreigners? I thought you would say working with locals. Please, colleagues, do respond to the questions.
Okay. Okay. So I would like to tackle the second question on, but maybe if you can repeat it, the role of culture, the second one, of innovation.
Or the role of the traditional practitioners council in innovation.
Okay. In innovation, okay. So, so basically, I think we have a lot of role to play there in terms of the innovation, coming from the innovations. Now I don't know about the IKS Council, but I just want to make just a general comment about the role of indigenous knowledge, practitioners and various associations and so forth in terms of the innovation. I think that, we have a lot of there's a lot of innovative knowledge embedded in the indigenous cultural knowledge, and the only challenge that we have is that I think our people are not really schooled in terms of protecting this. That's a challenge. That's why, experts like Ms. they're very, and Magdalene, they're very important in bringing that literacy in terms of that. But in terms of innovation, there's a lot of innovation that there can be a lot of innovation output, for example, that we can use to advance innovation. But somehow we need to have this, of course, protected. And I think that's the big challenge that we have. Right now, for example, my institute, we work with other institutions, for example, like, Central University of Technology in the Free State. They have their labs, and then, we collaborate with them. They bring the expertise. We have microbiologists there who specialize in these things. Some are chemists, and we're able to come up with new things. Like, for example, we do extraction. We produce oil from lingana, for example, stuff like that. So the only expertise that's required now is to have that protection. And I think once we have that protection, our innovation can advance in an unimpeded fashion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I trust that all participants and panel members will agree with me that this has been an interesting session. So I would like us to end it here. However, ask that we continue with the engagement. There will be a link that is going to be sent to all participants so that we can continue the discussion through that particular link. And now I am going to call onto the stage our poet, So please be ready for our poet, who is Ntate David Lushumo. And thereafter, I'm going to invite Professor Kidibone Pago so that he can do the closing remarks for us. I thank you very much. You have been a good audience and good panel members. Thank you to all the presenters.
Thank you. Thank you.
David.
Africa dumela, Africa dumela. Dumela Namibia, dumela South Africa. COVID-19 itsentsetsebe, boletse bo iphetotse sa ntlhoko, boletse bo gaila setšhaba. Barra matlhale di-professor di-doctor nna seopo sengwe a kolonune se gwenegwene loto lo tlhakantseng ditlhogo lo tlhakantse maboko a thuto boletse bo iphetotse sa ntlhoko boletse bo iphetotse kgwenyape bo aganyaula Africa e tlatse kgwedi e khibidu mo segamo ba tla ba mina ka nko tse pedi mo segamo ba tla ba mina ka nko tse pedi ba China ba mina ka nko tse pedi ba Donald Trump ba mina ka nko tse pedi ba president Matamela ba mina ka nko tse pedi Africa Namibia, Swaziland, Mozambique, Lesotho, South Africa. Dr. Zalim Kize, Cyril Ramatamela Ramaphosa, Nasa possibly president of Telepathy, Nasa Wane, Bolete be Petata Santoko, Namibia, South Africa. Nasa Posama South Africa, Nasa Posama Namibia, Bolete be Petata Santoko, Baramatala Companion di Toko, Sakajaja Setanel Telepathy, Sakajaja Setanel Africa. Kupamba di mbarna batla ba re thuseng kupamba right ba tsamaile batla ba itetlhabane batla ba loga se gone re tla re bona gore go iregileng Africa ya duma Africa e tletse botlhoko Africa e tletse dikeledi morana go le ba Africa ya lela bolwetse ke ba bo iphetetse tsa ntlhoko COVID-19 coronavirus kana mokala mogolo o ita khapetsa o ita bana ba golo Africa a ke tle ke boe ka morago ke mo le hikella ga mamosetsenyana ba bo ka di boparima mo da capital northwest ka mo province ya ga Dr. Job Mokgoro Africa mabuya Africa absheni maskwerere machironi nda kyalo.
Prof. Kidibone.
Good evening, colleagues. And thank you so much. I think my task is the easiest tonight because we are right at the end. Colleagues, I think you will agree with me that these conversations are timely and they are helpful. Just to remind us, the theme, as Prof. Maseko indicated in the beginning, it's called COVID-19 and Insights from Humanities, Social Sciences, and IKS, Perspectives from the Global South webinar series. Tonight, we were having talks on the topic research cooperation, intellectual property, and dissemination. And I am blown away, colleagues, by the speakers, by the engagements, by the responses that we are really giving as a society, as scholars, as community members. And I think we remain relevant to our current problems. We have a platform that we really need to cherish and appreciate, that has been created by our deans, by our universities. And I just want to thank the leadership of Professor Pamela Maseko, the leadership of Professor Nenesi and the research office, the leadership of Professor Alina Sehobie, for just making this stage for Africans to reflect on their own measures, interventions, responses to our current problems. I also want to specifically thank our speakers, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Zulu, Ms. Namwadi, Ms. Ngiki, Ntate Leshomo, for their excellent presentations tonight. And I think we are more richer. I know we do have many more questions. We want to talk to them. And Dr. Mohadi said that we will be receiving a link to continue these important discourse. I also want to thank her colleagues, that she was so much professional and enabling our speakers to engage us on these important topics. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank our participants, and especially our international participants. We have made observations that people come from all over the world, including India. We just want to say, please keep the fire burning. Join us on our next conversations, and I think you will receive even a much more enlightening conversations. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening and take care.